Hello! Today we are going to discuss modal verbs. What is our plan? First, we are going to discuss modal verbs, then their functions, and we are going to discuss the classification of modal verbs by function. So, what are modal verbs? These are such verbs as can, must, may, need, and etc. So, these are a type of verbs that are used to describe some abilities or our opinion about what we say. They are never used alone, and they always go together with other verbs. What are their characteristics? They never take the suffixes s, in, or ed, so they usually have one form. They are always used after the subject of the sentence, and they are followed by not in negative sentences, for example, should, shouldn't. They're always followed by a bare infinitive. A bare infinitive is a type of infinitive without the word to. We can have a simple infinitive, for example, do. We can have a perfect infinitive, for example, have done. What are the types of infinitive? Let's look. As I have said, a present or simple infinitive is to play. A bare infinitive is play. Continuous infinitive, to be playing. A bare continuous infinitive, be playing. Perfect infinitive, to have played. A bare form, have played. And perfect continuous infinitive, to have been playing, and the bare form, have been playing. So, with modal verbs, we are going to use play, be playing, have played, and have been playing. So, verbs without to. What are the functions of modal verbs? It can be necessity, absence of necessity, permission or prohibition, possibility, ability or inability, assumptions, criticism, offers, suggestions, probability, and advice. Now let's look at these functions closer. Obligation, duty, and necessity. It is something which is a rule, a law, or just an important thing to do. Absence of a necessity, it is when you decide yourself if you want to do something or not, so there isn't a rule. Next function is permission and prohibition. It is something you are allowed to do, which is permission, or something you are not allowed to do, and this is prohibition. Possibility is a chance. Ability or inability, it is something which is physically possible or physically impossible to do. Logical assumptions or deductions, it is when you express your opinion if something is possible or not. Criticism is when you express your dislike. Offers and suggestions, giving your variance of possible actions. For example, you suggest somebody to go to the cinema. Probability, it is a chance that something will happen in the future. And advice is expressing your opinion if something is a good idea or not a good idea. Now, let's look at verbs by function. First function is obligation, duty, and necessity. And here we have two main modal verbs. First one is must, and the second one is have to. Must is used only in the present, and have to can be used in the past, present, and in the future. The main difference between these two verbs is that must is usually used when the speaker himself or herself decided that something is necessary, And have to is usually used to speak about some rules when somebody else tells the speaker that some action is necessary. Next one is absence of necessity. Here we can use needn't and don't have to. So needn't means that something is not necessary to do in the present or in the future. Don't have to we use when we say that it isn't necessary to do something again in the present or in the future. And didn't have to, it wasn't necessary to do something in the past. Next, permission and prohibition. Can and may are used to ask for permission or to give permission. Mustn't and can't are used to say that it is forbidden to do something or it is against the law to do something. Possibility. Can plus a present infinitive is used to express a general possibility, not a specific situation. Could, may, might plus present infinitive are used to say to express possibility in a specific situation. Could, might, would plus perfect infinitive, so something was possible in the past, but it didn't happen. Ability and inability. This is something physically possible or impossible. We can use can to express an ability in the present or in the future. Could and couldn't are used in the past and they describe general ability. Could describes general ability and couldn't describes general and specific inability. So it means that you couldn't do something in a specific situation. Was or wasn't able to are used to express specific ability or inability in the past. So when you could do something in general, so you use the word could. For example, when I was a child, I could draw. When you manage to do something, when you speak about a specific situation, for example, I was able to fly to Paris. It is a specific situation, so that's why we use was able. And couldn't and wasn't able to, we can use both about general inabilities and specific inabilities. Then, assumptions and deductions. Must. We are certain that something is or was true. May, might, and could. So it is possible that something was true. Can't and couldn't. So we are almost certain that something is or was impossible. So if something is impossible now, we use can't. Something was impossible in the past, couldn't. Now let's look at some examples, because it is quite difficult to understand what I have just said. First example, you don't have to wear a uniform. It's not a school day. Here you have a modal verb, don't have to. This modal verb expresses an absence of necessity, so it's not necessary to wear a uniform. Next, may I use your phone, please? This verb is used to ask for permission. We can also start our sentence with can. Can I use your phone, please? It is also a permission. Take an umbrella. It might rain today. So here I am making some suppositions. So we are speaking about a specific possibility in the future. I wasn't able to finish homework yesterday. So here we have the verb wasn't able, and it is used to speak about ability or inability. So here we have a specific inability in the past. Mike doesn't pick up the phone. He must have left it at home. And here we are making an assumption about the past. That's why we have the verb must, because we are sure that his phone is at home, and the perfect infinitive, because we are making assumptions about the past. So we can also describe criticism with modal verbs. Then we use the verbs could, should, or ought to. For example, you could be polite to her. Yes, I am criticizing a person. Or you should have called me, but you didn't. Yes, I am criticizing someone's actions in the past. You ought to be more careful. Then offers and suggestions. Here we have verbs can, would, shall, can and could. For example, can I give you a hand? Yes, I'm offering my help. Would you like to go to the cinema? Yes, I'm suggesting some actions. Shall we go? Also suggesting. And we could go to the cinema. It's also suggestion. Then probability. It's a chance that something will happen in the future. Here we use will or should and ought to. He will call me tomorrow, so we are 100% sure that this is possible. Should and ought to. The weather should get better tomorrow. We are like 70% sure. Advice. Here we have the verbs should, ought to, and shall. If we are giving a general advice, we use should. You should see a doctor. We can also use ought to. For example, you ought to read this book. If we ask for advice, we use shall. Shall I go to London? So, today we've discussed all the modal verbs of the English language and their functions. See you next lesson.